All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome back to for part two of Why We Push Ourselves Too Hard. The many faces of fight or flight. I am just checking in to make sure all of my, yes, everything seems to be working pretty well. So great to be here with you again. And as I was talking about, and for those of you who don't know me, I'll just introduce myself. I'm Dr. Sandra Lewis. I'm a clinical psychologist and personal energy strategist. And what does that mean? I connect people with the resources they need to refuel and reconnect to their inner power so that they can go from being burned out to sustainable leadership and creating the life and career they love. So, as I was thinking about tonight, last time I focused on frustration as one of the stress responses that one of the responses that actually helps to intensify stress and can cause us to push ourselves too hard because we persist to try to get out of frustration. So tonight I want to talk about another factor that can be behind stress intensity and stress becoming more intense and also lending to us pushing ourselves a little bit too hard. And as I thought about this, I was reminded of a story from my early career as a psychologist, where what happened in this early, I was probably about 27 ish, right? 28 ish, as a young psychologist working in what was my dream job at the time, working with families in a community at a community mental health center. And I had this supervisor who, well, it wasn't my direct supervisor, but someone who had power in the organization and oversaw different, units in the organization and also trained people in their discipline, other people who were growing to be providers, right? Because I was a psychologist, there were psychiatrists, there were psychiatry trainees, there was social work trainees. So she was a trainer and a person who could make decisions. And one day in her office, we're having a conversation about, work, career direction. And in the course of this conversation, we started to talk about the families we were working with. And, I really talked about, how much I felt a kinship with the families we worked with and how much I saw them very similar to myself. And she essentially said to me, "Well, you're the only one. Like, nobody sees themselves as similar to the families." And I have to tell you, in that moment, when she said that, I'm in my dream job. I'm about to do this magical work that I've been dying to do all of my life. I finally got this doctoral degree. I'm ready to do this work. And here this person says to me that I'm the only person in the organization who actually feels a kinship with the families that we see. And I just thought, and my little 28-year-old self, I was crushed inside, and I was like, I'm one of those people that people say, everything you feel shows in your face. So I couldn't even look at her for a moment. I had to just look away, and I said, you know. But that experience of feeling like here's someone in power who can make decisions about the service we offer, what we do, and decide like what how to perceive families and train other people about how we perceive families. She was everything that I was coming to this community to help eradicate, right? I was trying to get rid of people who saw our families in these negative ways and attempted to create hardship in their lives. And there I was in the office of this person who would do to our families what I was actually trying to stop. So that day, I literally went home and I went to bed. I just went to bed. It was late. There was nobody at the office that I could talk to. So I went to bed. And then I went to the next day or next opportunity I had to talk to my one of my mentors who also happened to work there and did see the families as similar to her, but right. I had to talk to her and I had to talk to another mentor. And then I talked to one of my good friends who was also who worked there. And I just had to get with people who could see what I saw in terms of what we were trying to build in a community. And that was how I started to move around this feeling of being like, oh my God, this is terrible. I don't know what I'm going to do. This lady can like make my job horrible. She can make life for families horrible. And I started to really work with people, like talk with people who saw who saw the work similarly to me. And then we started to talk about, okay, well, here are some ways we can work around that. Here are some things we can do. So I had to have a team help me with that, right? So one of the things that happens when there are things going on in our environment that are stressful to us is we sometimes think we have to handle on our own. I could not control the way this woman thought about families. I couldn't control the way she even perceived her work or my work for that matter, or the way she perceived me. Um, but I had to find a way to come in touch with and to find people who were allies with me that saw the work similarly to me and would be there to support me doing the work and also help me to work in a way that we could help buffer some of what she might be able to do with families. So as we talk about this experience tonight, that can intensify stress, that sort of sense of being out of control, let's begin to think first about how allies are very useful to us, mentors are very useful to us in situations like this. So we're going to get started with me taking a moment to share the model again. Um, we'll go through the model, and then I'll walk you through the process, and we'll talk about how can get stuck in some of these, right? So, so here we go. Let us go with this. Looks like it's loading. Let's make sure it's loading. Yes, there it is. It's working. Okay. Welcome, everybody. I see a couple people have joined me. Welcome. It's nice to have you here. Very nice to have you here. So, all right, so let's talk a little bit about the stress cycle. I just started with a story started with a story of my own experience of being in a very stressful situation early in my career and feeling like, oh no, this supervisor could have an impact on me and on the people I was there to serve, and it could be really negative. And I had to figure out what resources I needed to help me navigate that. That was one of those situations that actually sent me home into the bed. So right now, I'm going to go back through this stress cycle model so that we can see how we might be able to work with situations that are where we feel like there's a loss of control. So the stressor, I'm going to walk you actually through like stressors I've seen clients work with, clients I've seen work with. So sometimes there's a stressor where you've been working on a project, and what happens in the process is somewhere in your organization, there's a change in direction. And that change in direction could either mean everything you've done gets scrapped, or you have to do that or an add in. The add in is the one that I've seen most. So anytime a stressor shows up, there's the question of whether or not it's a threat. All right, we got this added in work we're going to do. It's more than we expected. We were already on a tight deadline. So now what are we going to do? Yes, we decide this is a threat. And of course, at this point, our nervous system is aroused. This is sympathetic nervous system arousal. It's like survival mode. We're going to have to figure out how to manage this, right? The second question we ask ourselves is, can I handle this threat? Right? The first piece, is it a threat? Our nervous system's aroused. Can I handle it? If we decide we can handle it, we say the resources are available. That could be that we say, oh, I'm going to reach out to another colleague. I know somebody who can help me with pieces of this so this deadline can be met and I don't have to be too stressed out. And I'm going to use my resources, and that's going to help me reset myself. And then I'm going to get to this place where I feel some relief. I'm going to get back to calm. My parasympathetic nervous system is going to come back online, and I'm going to be able to think through like how I'm going to manage this project, right? So the person on this side is accessing resources, figuring out what do I really need? How will it work for me? How is the best way to manage what appears to be a threat for me? And then the second thing that can happen is that we say, can we handle it? But we say, no, I cannot handle this. I don't know how. And the person on this side is also likely to really be saying, I'm losing control. I don't have enough autonomy in this situation. I'm often being given extra work or I'm being redirected and I'm wasting my time. How am I going to build my career? And when they start to feel that, oftentimes the pressure of it leaves them feeling that they have to work harder. That pushing a little bit harder can also lead to more emotional strain, worry, and this is where they can get stuck. But it's that feeling of being out of control, loss of autonomy, loss possibly of the chance to grow your career can be one of the challenges that occurs when we get out of control, right? We have that sense that things are out of our control. This might also happen when you're in a situation where you have a manager who is always looking over your shoulder. Like no matter what you do, you're being second guessed, you're being asked questions. They want to be kept in a loop at every step of the way. And so you're constantly double checking yourself. So it's like you do work, but then you go back and you do it again. Okay, did I do it right? Okay, I've actually edited this thing like 5 times. I even got somebody else to read it, but let me still read it again, right? Because you're always being second guessed. There's something, this feeling that the project is not really in your control, that somebody else is really guiding it, and you're almost just like a pawn being moved. Leaves you, that feeling of being out of control makes you want to try to get some control. It makes you also want to try to prove yourself. And I will say there's another piece that happens on this that's along that same line where you feel like you have to prove yourself, but it's also out of your control. And it was similar to what I dealt with as a young psychologist when there was a supervisor or a higher up who was a like a chief in my organization, a program director or unit director said that she didn't see the families the way that I saw them. And in fact, she had a fairly negative opinion of the families that we were serving, right? So here I was wanting to be able to eventually move up in this organization. She's looking at me and saying, well, if you see yourself like them, there's no way I could possibly ever see you as moving to a different place in this organization. And so there I was feeling like my direction was being actually my ability to move myself forward was in someone else's control and that I was going to lose control of it. This can happen too when we are in a situation where we feel like um, we're the only person that looks like us. I was in that particular situation. There were several Black professionals in that setting, but many of them didn't have a lot of power. So we were all in some ways a bit vulnerable, but we had each other. We were able to talk to each other. We were able to talk through these kinds of situations with each other. Sometimes when we are the only in an office, we feel that people's opinions of us can impact our career. So we work a little bit harder to try to prove ourselves to others. I actually had a colleague who used to say, just prove them wrong. And that was her way of trying to manage. But then what happens is you're really working with somebody else's ideas about you. You don't control those ideas. And sometimes you don't really quite know what they are, though you may have hints of it. You may have hints like you may have experienced microaggressions or other kinds of events in your organization and make you say, these people don't have the best opinion of me. And sometimes that makes us push a little bit harder. Sometimes also being the only person in your office who looks like you can leave you in a position where you feel like you have to do your best or do extra so that other people who look like you don't get cut out of the possibility of having a role at that organization. So those kinds of experiences leave us in this place of extra nervous system arousal where we're worrying and we're starting to push ourselves a little bit too hard because the lack of control, all of those experiences, whether it's a microaggression or whether it is the lack of autonomy, leave us with a very highly aroused nervous system and an unsatisfactory resolution. The work I was doing when I was younger in this organization before it was work I loved. I loved working with families, but I had these obstacles that were there also that I knew I would have to work around. So, my strategy, and it's one that I would suggest to you, is one of the strategies that is very useful when you feel there's a lack of control is to find yourself some allies. There is nothing like having allies to help you get out of this cycle and not move into this place where you have become so emotionally exhausted that your effectiveness is decreased and your wellness is at risk. So, that is my really one tip for tonight, is to really get you to focus on what are the other resources you can access. I think I mentioned this last week when I said on this side, when we feel like we can handle something and we go through the stress cycle, our resources are available. But those resources don't just have to be within us, because by talking to someone outside of ourselves, we actually are able to access what is within us. That person can help us center, they can spark things, right? They can spark a little inspiration. And then we say, oh, I know how to do this. I know exactly what I'm going to do. So I will say to you that when you're in a situation where you feel there's a lack of control, one of the best resources that you can utilize is your network, your allies. And if you're feeling like you don't have them in your organization, you can even start outside. You have professional networks. You may have mentors that you've had in the past. Right now, the mentor that I had years ago when I was a young psychologist is still available to me. I will call her for anything that I was worried about professionally to get her input. So I encourage you to really think about who can support you. Support also helps us stay out of this loop where we are feeling like we don't have enough to manage and we have to go harder just to be able to stay ahead or to keep up with everyone else. The one thing that also just popped in my head is that I mentioned this last week, is that when we get stuck in this cycle, there's a dialogue that's going on in our head. There's something we're saying to us that reflects this worrying, this rumination, a belief that we have. One of the things that just came to my mind was how so many of my elders used to say that they would have to work twice as hard because of their concerns or their experiences with racism. So in order for them to advance, they would have to work twice as hard. So sometimes we also had role models that taught us and helped us learn that in some situations, the way that you're going to have to go at it is to work harder. So in those situations, you do need support. There's no reason for you to try to go at it alone, to to figure out like that I'm just going to be stuck here pushing myself harder and then feeling frustrated that you still don't have the autonomy and feel valued in the way that you want to feel valued, right? I'm going to stop the share and just summarize by saying one of the most important things we can do when we get stuck in chronic stress is to reach out for support, to figure out what it is that we are exactly needing. The feelings in your body, the sense of the feeling of the chronic stress, the thoughts in your head are all clues to what you need. And when you find an ally, a mentor, a coach, someone you can talk to help you sort through that, to figure out what are your next best steps, that's one of the best things that you can do for yourself. It will help you flourish as a person, and it will also help you to flourish making the impact you want to make in your career. I'm just going to check and see if anybody has any questions. I'm looking in the comments and I don't see any questions. But if you do, you can always direct message me. Um, and if you want any more insight on the stress model that I've been sharing this last couple of these two in this two-part series, please feel free to reach out to me for support. All right. You all have the most beautiful night that you can imagine if you're in the East Coast time zone with me. And if you're having a great morning somewhere else, enjoy the rest of your day. All right. It's been my pleasure. Take care.